My child, they said it was coincidence. They said relationships just drift apart sometimes. They said people change. But deep inside your spirit, you felt something far deeper unfolding. This separation wasn't random. This silence wasn't accidental. This distance wasn't meaningless. God is breaking ties for your protection, and if you are paying close attention right now, you will realize that what once felt like loss is actually divine rescue. What once felt like rejection is actually divine redirection. What once felt like abandonment is actually God stepping between you and the very thing that would have destroyed your future. You've been praying for peace, for stability, for clarity, for favor, for breakthrough. But sometimes the first answer to those prayers looks like loss. Sometimes protection feels like pain at first. Sometimes freedom arrives wrapped in heartbreak. God will not always explain what He is removing right away, because if you understood too soon, you might run back to what He just delivered you from. So He simply moves, quietly, powerfully, decisively. One day the connection feels different. Conversations change. Energy shifts. The comfort you once felt disappears. And you find yourself wondering what went wrong. The truth is, nothing went wrong. Something went right. There are ties in your life that looked like blessings but were slowly becoming traps. There were voices you kept trusting that were slowly pulling you off course. There were relationships that felt safe but were secretly draining your spirit. God saw what you couldn't see. God heard what you didn't hear. God knew what was forming behind closed doors. And because He loves you too much to let you be destroyed by what you couldn't discern yet, He stepped in Himself. You may not realize it, but there were doors closing around you. There were traps being set behind smiles. There were spiritual battles happening in places you never entered physically. The reason God had to break the tie so suddenly is because delay would have cost you everything. Some connections cannot be gently loosened, they must be cut. Some bonds are so entangled with your destiny that only God's hand can remove them without tearing your soul apart. You felt the confusion. One day everything seemed normal. The next day, distance. One day laughter. The next day silence. One day promises. The next day disappearing. And your heart kept asking, why? God was answering with protection. You weren't being rejected, you were being rescued. You weren't being forgotten, you were being preserved. You weren't being punished, you were being shielded. There are people who only walk with you for a season. Not because they are evil, but because their assignment in your life has ended. And if God didn't remove them, you would never step into the next level of who you are becoming. Some people only know the old version of you. Some people only benefit from the broken version of you. Some people only connect with you when you are small, silent, or struggling. But God is preparing to elevate you. And elevation always triggers separation. You could not carry everyone into the next season. Some weights had to be dropped. Some chains had to be unlocked. Some access had to be revoked. If they stayed, they would have limited what God is about to release through you. They would have spoken doubt into your new confidence. They would have poured fear into your new courage. They would have attached you to old habits while God is calling you into new authority. That is why the tie broke even when you were still trying to hold on. That is why the communication stopped even when you were still hoping. That is why reconciliation didn't happen even though you were willing. God was not answering the way you expected because He was answering the way you needed. Right now, you are in the uncomfortable space between what was and what will be. You look back and miss the familiar, even if it hurt you. You look ahead with uncertainty because the future isn't fully visible yet. This is the exact place where faith is built. This is the sacred in-between where God reshapes your heart, rewires your thinking, and restores your self-worth. There were moments you tolerated disrespect because you feared loneliness. There were moments you excused manipulation because you feared abandonment. There were moments you accepted crumbs because you feared having nothing at all. But God refuses to let you live on crumbs when He has prepared a feast for you. And sometimes the table must be cleared before the feast can be served. God saw how that tie was pulling you into anxiety. God saw how that connection was feeding your doubt, weakening your joy, dimming your confidence. Even if that person didn't intend to harm you, the effect was still destructive. And God protects not only from direct danger but from slow emotional erosion. You were slowly losing yourself, little by little. Your smile wasn't as full. Your peace wasn't as steady. Your prayers weren't as focused. And you started thinking that this was just how life was supposed to feel. But God says you were never meant to survive in survival mode. You were meant to live in abundance, in peace, in clarity, in strength. There is a version of you that will breathe easier without that tie. There is a version of you that will sleep better without that stress. There is a version of you that will love deeper without that confusion. And that version of you is rising now. The grief you feel is real. The pain is valid. God is not dismissing your tears. He counts every one of them. But do not confuse grief with regret. You are not grieving something you should return to, you are grieving something you outgrew. Healing always feels strange at first because pain became familiar. Chaos once felt normal. Confusion once felt expected. But as God heals you, peace will feel almost unfamiliar. Silence will feel loud. Stability will feel foreign. And that's how you know you are changing. You may wonder why God didn't warn you ahead of time. Why He let you grow attached. Why He let you love deeply. It is because love itself was never the mistake. The tie was not meaningless. It taught you something. It revealed something. It strengthened something in you. But just because something taught you does not mean it is allowed to stay forever. Not everything that enters your life is meant to remain in your life. Some things come to wake you up. Some things come to mirror your wounds. Some things come to expose your patterns. And once the lesson is complete, the season ends. God cut the tie because you were becoming addicted to what He was trying to heal. You were clinging to what was familiar instead of trusting what was faithful. You were negotiating with what was hurting you instead of surrendering to what was protecting you. Right now, your emotions may be torn between logic and longing. You know the separation makes sense, but your heart still aches. This doesn't mean you made a mistake, it means you are human. And God is not offended by your emotions. He is using them to soften you, not weaken you. One day you will look back at this season and say, if that had stayed, would not be here today. One day you will thank God for the unanswered calls, the broken routines, the changed plans, the uncomfortable adjustments. One day you will realize that what you thought was the end was actually the detour that saved your life. God is not removing because you are unworthy. He is removing because you are valuable. Protecting something precious often requires difficult decisions. And you are precious. Even now, God is surrounding you with quiet evidence of His care. A sudden opportunity. A new perspective. A moment of peace that comes out of nowhere. A strength you didn't know you had. These are not coincidences. These are confirmations. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not being abandoned. You are being repositioned. You are not losing. You are being protected. The ache you feel will not last forever. The questions will not echo forever. The emptiness will not remain empty. God never removes without replacing. But the replacement never looks the same as what was removed. It will be healthier, stronger, purer, more aligned. Let your heart rest in this truth: if God had to remove it, it was not safe to keep. If God had to break it, it could not follow you into your future. If God allowed it to fade, it was not designed to grow with you. There is a divine future waiting for you that requires new eyes, new strength, new boundaries, and new trust. The old ties could not survive that distance. They were never meant to. So breathe. Let go. Mourn if you must. But do not chase what God has already released from your hands. Do not beg for what God has already blocked. Do not reopen doors God closed to protect your peace. You are standing at the edge of a safer season. A stronger season. A clearer season. A season where your worth will no longer be negotiated. A season where your heart will no longer be confused. A season where your spirit will feel light again. God is breaking ties for your protection. And one day very soon, you will understand why it had to happen exactly this way. You didn't imagine the shift. You didn't overthink the change. Your spirit sensed it before your mind could explain it. Something loosened. Something detached. Something that once felt tightly woven into your life suddenly felt distant, unfamiliar, unreachable. And the hardest part wasn't the separation itself, it was the silence God allowed to follow. Because silence forces you to sit with the truth you had been avoiding. Silence exposes the bond for what it truly was without distractions. Silence reveals whether the tie was built on love or on fear. There are separations that scream and separations that whisper. Most of the time, God chooses the whisper. He slowly drains the emotional energy. He slowly removes the urgency. He slowly quiets the attachment. Not to torment you, but to wean you from what you were never meant to depend on so heavily. Because somewhere along the journey, that tie stopped being a connection and started becoming a crutch. You didn't fall apart because the person left. You fell apart because you had wrapped too much of your identity around their presence. And God will never compete with anyone for your identity. He will gently, and sometimes painfully, remove whatever you are leaning on more than Him. There was a time when you thought losing them would destroy you. You told yourself you wouldn't survive the emptiness. You believed the ache would swallow you whole. But look at you now. You are still standing. You are still breathing. You are still moving forward, even if it's slowly, even if it's trembling. That alone is proof that God's hand is stronger than your fear. Sometimes God allows the tie to break when you least expect it, because if He waited for you to feel ready, you would never let go. Your heart would keep negotiating. Your emotions would keep rewriting the truth. Your attachment would keep building excuses. So God steps in when your defenses are down and does what your will could not. It hurts in waves. One moment you feel acceptance. The next moment, grief rushes back in. A memory triggers the ache. A familiar song tightens your chest. A place you once shared feels empty. Do not think this means you are failing to heal. This is how healing unfolds. It doesn't disappear in one clean moment. It loosens its grip gradually. You are unlearning what your nervous system once called normal. You are retraining your heart to feel safe without chaos. You are teaching your soul that love does not have to feel unstable, uncertain, or heavy. This process is sacred, though it feels uncomfortable. There was a version of you that begged for clarity. That version of you pleaded for honesty. That version of you waited for effort. And now God has given you clarity in the form of distance, honesty in the form of silence, and effort in the form of His own intervention. What you lacked from them, God supplied through removal. What hurts the most is not always the person, it's the future you imagined with them. It's the conversations you thought you'd have. The plans you pictured. The roles you thought they would play in your next chapter. Letting go of imagined futures can feel even heavier than letting go of real ones. But imagined futures built on unstable foundations would have collapsed later with far greater devastation. God cut the tie before the collapse could destroy you. There are times when God protects you not by stopping the storm, but by moving you out of its path before it forms. You may never fully see what He saved you from. You may never fully know how much worse it could have been. But you will one day feel the peace that resulted from His timing. You did not lose love. You lost attachment. You did not lose destiny. You lost distraction. You did not lose your chance. You lost a counterfeit version of what your heart truly needs. What is coming toward you now requires emotional stability, spiritual clarity, and firm boundaries. The old tie thrived on blurred lines, on uncertainty, on waiting, on hoping without evidence. That environment could never support what God is preparing to build in your life. You are stepping into a season where you will no longer have to beg to be chosen. You will no longer have to question where you stand. You will no longer have to interpret silence as love. God is aligning you with connections that do not confuse you, drain you, or shrink you. But first, He had to empty your hands. Right now, it still feels like loss because your hands are empty. But emptiness is not your final state, it is your preparation point. You cannot receive what God is about to place in your life while still gripping what He has removed. Your hands must be open. Your heart must be soft. Your soul must be light enough to carry what is next. You may still feel the urge to reach out, to check on them, to replay conversations, to analyze every detail, to search for closure that never came. But some closures do not come through conversation. They come through surrender. They come through acceptance. They come through peace that no explanation could ever produce. You do not need their permission to heal. You do not need their apology to move forward. You do not need their understanding to obey what God has already made clear in your spirit. There is a reason your prayers feel different now. There is a reason your appetite for certain things has changed. There is a reason your tolerance for emotional chaos is lower. There is a reason you crave stability more than intensity now. You are evolving. And evolution demands release. You are not healing backward. You are not stuck. You are shedding. And shedding can look messy before it looks beautiful. God is not tearing your life apart. He is disentangling it. He is gently pulling the threads that were choking your growth. He is restoring circulation to places that had gone numb. Feeling again is part of becoming alive again. There will come a day when you wake up and realize you didn't think about them first thing in the morning. The ache will no longer greet you before the sun rises. The weight will no longer follow you through ordinary moments. The memory will still exist, but it will no longer control you. That day is closer than you think. For now, let the process do what it was designed to do. Let the tears wash the residue out of your spirit. Let the silence teach your heart to rest. Let the distance show you who you were becoming while you were too close to notice. You did not lose your worth when the tie broke. You discovered it. You did not lose your future when the door closed. You cleared the path for it. You did not lose love. You were redirected toward a purer form of it. God is protecting you even now, even in the ache, even in the unanswered questions, even in the lonely minutes you don't talk about. And He is not finished yet. One day, without dramatic announcement, without a loud sign, without a sudden miracle shaking the ground beneath your feet, something inside you will settle. You will wake up and notice that your chest feels lighter. Your thoughts will no longer run in anxious circles. The tightness around your heart will loosen. And you will realize that the storm did not last forever. The protection worked. You will begin to understand that God was not taking from you, He was clearing space for you. Space to breathe without fear. Space to love without confusion. Space to hope without reservation. Space to grow without resistance. You will see that the tie that once felt impossible to lose had quietly become the very thing blocking your peace. It won't happen all at once. You won't suddenly forget everything. But the meaning will change. The memory will soften. The pain will lose its voice. What once stabbed will gently tap. What once controlled you will simply pass through your mind like a cloud instead of a storm. And that is when gratitude will quietly replace anger. Not because the hurt was small, but because the growth was greater. You will look back and see moments you once misunderstood. Conversations that felt confusing will suddenly make sense. Delays that once felt cruel will reveal themselves as protection. Endings that felt harsh will reveal themselves as mercy. And you will whisper, maybe with tears in your eyes but peace in your spirit, "Thank you, God, for not giving me what I begged for when you knew it would have destroyed me later." There is a strength growing in you now that did not exist before. Not loud strength. Not forceful strength. But quiet, grounded, unshakable strength. The kind that does not chase what walks away. The kind that does not beg for what God has already removed. The kind that knows when to wait and when to release. The kind that trusts even when answers are slow. Your standards are shifting. Your boundaries are rising. Your discernment is sharper. And the most beautiful part is, you didn't force this change. It formed naturally through surrender. That is how you know this was divine. You are no longer desperate for what once felt like survival. You are no longer starving for attention that once felt like oxygen. You are no longer shrinking yourself just to keep someone from leaving. You are standing taller, even if your knees still shake at times. You have learned that love should not require you to abandon yourself. You have learned that peace is not boring, it is sacred. You have learned that consistency is not dull, it is safety. You have learned that silence is not always rejection, it is sometimes redirection. And the future God is opening before you now is not built on uncertainty. It does not require you to guess, chase, decode, or beg. It arrives with clarity. With effort. With alignment. With mutual growth. With spiritual safety. What is coming will recognize you without confusion. What is coming will not require constant repair. What is coming will not trigger your old wounds. What is coming will feel like rest after war. You will still carry compassion for what was. You will still honor what you learned. You will still remember who you were in that season. But you will no longer bleed from it. And the most astonishing realization will be this: you were never abandoned in the breaking. You were held the entire time. God was in the silence. God was in the distance. God was in the unanswered messages. God was in the sudden detachment. God was in the nights you cried without understanding why. God was in the days you forced yourself to keep going when your heart felt heavy. Every step was covered. Every tear was counted. Every breath was sustained. And now, here you stand, not the same as before, but stronger, wiser, calmer, more anchored in who you truly are. You will not walk into the next season unaware anymore. You will walk in awake. Awake to red flags you once ignored. Awake to patterns you once excused. Awake to the truth that love should not cost you your peace. You are no longer desperate to be chosen. You know you are chosen. You are no longer afraid of loss. You trust God's removal. You are no longer clinging to the past. You are preparing for the promise. The tie had to be broken because what is ahead cannot be built on what was behind. God does not demolish your heart for no reason. He clears foundations only when he is preparing something stronger to rise in its place. And what is rising in you now is unshakable. So walk forward without looking back in guilt. Rest without doubting God's timing. Trust without demanding proof. Love without fear. Hope without hesitation. God didn't break the tie to hurt you. He broke it to save you.